No. No buzz. At Just Bees Book Club. I read Faraway the Southern Sky by Joseph Andras. Joseph, I don't know. Um, this is an interesting one. This is an arc, obviously. It's not out until May 21st. In translation, it is a book that I had to put down, actually. I read the first 20 or 30 pages. It's, I think, ultimately just shy of 80 pages. Yeah, ends at page 79, at least in this copy. It is autofiction, I guess. I don't know what that term actually means. In the second person singular, so it's a you novel. I think I read the first like 20, 30 pages and I put it down. That was like 2 months ago, and then I picked it back up after a month or two break, and kind of really ended up enjoying it a lot. It is about sort of meandering through Paris in the wake of I'm gonna butcher this, but when I cock, the one of the names, one of the according to this book, like hundreds of names of the person who would be ultimately remembered historically as Ho Chi Minh. It is a sort of like a meander, a meander through Paris, and from 2017 through 2020, according to the dates at the end of this. Right, that's winter 2017 through summer 2020 is the writing time. Sort of trying to come to terms with a lot of things, but the main sort of focalized thing is pre Ho Chi Minh's experience in exile in Paris, and how he came to his politics, and also the politics that are happening in that 3-year period. It's summer 2020. So like the Gilets jaunes are like sort of pop up throughout it, that sort of thing. I put it down initially because I was reading it and I was just like, I don't fucking know what's happening. I don't like, and I don't need. That's not like how I approach literature. Hi B, what's good? You know this, but it was alienating in a way where it was just like I can't. I'm not. It wasn't alienating. Is like a very strong term. I was reading it and just being like, none of this is connecting in any way. I remember initially there being like a couple of sentences where like this is pretty, but I have no sort of context for it, and the beauty did not exceed the lack of context. I ended up picking it back up and kind of burning through it in a few days, and I don't have like big thoughts about it, but I do have some thoughts about specific things that I this is the first time in a really long time that I have just straight up written in a book. You can see there, there. Ooh, it's a big highlight. You know, I got some underlines in here. And I went over the book, like that one. You see a big underline there. I went through the book and looked at my underlines and took some notes on which ones I thought were actually worth thinking through. And so I'm going to just kind of like hop through this book. The first thing I noted was this passage on page 4 of the advanced reader copy. Again, this is advanced reader copies. They very explicitly tell you don't quote this for review, and I'm not reviewing. I'm just talking to bees. So, on your left, a vacuum cleaner sprawls below a garage door. A father pushes a stroller, single-handed, with a kid inside who will no doubt one day push another. There's a bunch in here. I think it's particularly good writing. The image of a father pushing a stroller one-handed with a child inside who will one day push another. That is just like a really smart way of talking about futurity, and also just like a very kind image of working people. So to move on, this next one, okay. This one is like a little bit of a bigger thought, so. You make a stop at 129, at which address Alon... You make a stop at 129, at which address Elaine Gizmar, then a militant in the proletarian left, paid tribute to Maoist worker Pierre Auvernay, felled some 3 years after the death of Ho Chi Minh by a security officer at the Renault company. The murderer would be bumped off 5 years later by the armed nuclei for popular autonomy, while the militant eventually conformed to orthodox expectations. There's a density in the language here that I think is like extremely indicative of this novel. The way that it telescopes in and out of history in so few words. You make a stop is presumably Andras making a stop at a particular location, and that location is significant for historical reasons, and then all of a sudden those historical reasons shoot back dozens of years, and follows that really particular thread, and also the militant eventually conformed to orthodox expectations is like a brutal condemnation of the world, I think, just in a few sentences. The book does this consistently. How far away the southern sky? My bad. Sorry. Far Away the Southern Sky does this consistently, where it will grab onto a moment and telescope it way the fuck back and then jump forward. Not to be like on my shit or whatever, but like this is Stephen King's Carrie to me, right? This is like the book that spoils itself. I love that shit. And larger point, not really any off the dome. My glasses are hella dirty. There is something really impressive and very dense about the writing in this book. And so now I'm going to read a really long passage. And my note here says, a pretty solid politics here, plus a good joke. This is a passage about the formation of the state in some ways, or the function of the state. And how it works. Plus a good joke. This is how the state is made. Deaf as a doornail, a big iron doornail. One may formulate 2 or 3 reasonable demands, resolutely decent, even bowing slightly, eyelids lowered, and see it gloat in return from the commanding heights occupied by its fat iron ass. One may swear that one's had enough, really enough. It'll invoke the law that it, lucky coincidence, designed. At this juncture, one may knock down a ministry door or sketch thick clusters of smoke in the sky by burning the cars, apartments, or restaurants of its most well-to-do citizens. And all of a sudden, it sees you. Should one turn a police station or van into ashes, then one will be let inside. For torture first, then negotiations. It's grim, but this is how the state is made. Maybe Versailles hadn't looked hard enough into Wynn's eyes. As for the press, it didn't say a word. You have a look at the next day's issues. Columns in the Figaro, the Petit Journal, the Matin, the Petit Parisien, the La Croix. Nothing doing. And so he would go, and so he would soon go to Moscow, to Crimea, to Hong Kong. He would be declared dead, cruise the oceans, end up in prison, write poems, and call on poets to coat their verses in steel. And then he would discuss, compose, negotiate, state that blood is only misery, reply that war will break out for 100 years if the French state continues to ignore us, and then arrive, soft-spoken, at a resolution. Let's fight. Then he would raise an army whose black sandals were carved out of tire rubber, and he would smash the empire. Ingratitude doesn't number among the virtues. Let's therefore praise the police, lending a hand to historians. The force's passion for surveillance, espionage, tracking notes, tales, reports, informers, and dirty tricks ensures the delight of future audiences, and yours with them. In Aix-en-Provence, Provence, the National Archives for Overseas France keeps the file on Winnicott, compiled by an agent named Paul Arnaud in the form of a belt-strapped canvas folder. Therefore, praise the police is the good joke. Yeah. I don't know. Here's another small image. You would like to be describing a bird's flight, but there are only plants in a wooden tray. Again, you would like to be describing a bird's flight, but there are only plants in a wooden tray. I think this quote is pretty. I think the language is pretty. I think it's extremely well written. That's a sentence I would love to have written, obviously. More than that, though, I think... Sorry. Doubling back. I think it's a pretty sentence. I think it's also doing useful work because it's a description of like a basically a cul-de-sac. And it is, I think, in pushing the image from what one would like to describe as a bird in flight, that is like a very active metaphor or image, versus plants in wooden boxes, which is a very sort of sedentary thing. It is actively doing the work of excuse me. It's actively doing the work of describing the kinds of life that exist in a place, right? It is not saying you would like to describe a bird in flight, but instead you see desiccated grass, but instead you see multiple similar houses, things that are not actively alive, right? It is keeping the image in the realm of things that live and grow, which is important in the context that it is in. The other thing that it is doing, I think is one of the coolest parts of this book, and one of the reasons that I had to put it down for a while, is saying you would like, and this is assuming, as I eventually came to, that you're reading this as the you is the author, this The second person is not directed to the reader, but to the author. It is like it is a really indicative passage that there are many, many before, many, many after of, that is sort of establishing the truth claim of the text, that you would like to describe a bird in flight is not just a pretty metaphor or a useful metaphor. It is also a way of saying, like, I am not saying that there was something that I saw that I didn't actually see. You would like to describe a bird in flight. Let me actually just reread it. You would like to be describing a bird's flight, but there are only plants in a wooden tray. It's actually but there were only here. That's super important, because the truth claim that this is making is, I am, again, we're transposing you and I here, but like, I, the author, am only telling you what I actually saw, is done very specifically through the way that sentence is written, and you would like to describe, but you can't. But you sort of sneak that in, of course. But you don't do it because what you, meaning the author, saw was plants in a wooden box, wooden tray, in a wooden tray, plants in a wooden tray. There's every sentence in this fucking book is doing something along those lines, and again, I found it exhausting, and then I found it exhilarating. How many more of these do I want to really go through? Yeah, this next one is important. Longer passage. I am now reading. Quote, "How I Chose Leninism," unquote. That's the title of an article Ho Chi Minh gave to a Soviet periodical in spring 1960, on the eve of his 70th birthday. Quote, "After the First World War, I eked out a living in Paris," end quote. His solidarity with the October Revolution wasn't solely a question of instincts, he would say. If he was fond of Lenin, this fondness grew unaware of his writings. The man had liberated the Russian people. That was enough for him. At the time, what French socialists debated until 1 a.m. was whether or not they should join the communists. In other words, leave the Second International for the Third, established a year earlier in 1919. Ho Chi Minh would admit that he didn't know which of the second or third to come down for, nor, eventually, which of the camps formed in the shadows of these Roman twiglets. The needle in his compass pointed only with great care, unflappably in one direction: the fate of the colonies. A comrade gave him Lenin's theses to read, in the form of a draft later published in 2 parts in the pages of L'Humanité, just a few days before the Congress opened in Petrograd, and so he read them. Admitted he didn't get everything, but what he got, reading and rereading, was that communists cared about the colonies far more than socialists. What emotion, what enthusiasm, he would add. He cried, alone in his room, he spoke aloud, called out to an imaginary crowd that this was now the path to liberation. It wouldn't be entirely devoid of sense to imagine Ho Chi Minh reconstructing this visitation after the fact, and this word visitation seems the right one to you. There is in his tears something of the collapsed zealot on his way to Damascus, the dazed virgin called to sainthood. What could be more awe-inspiring, indeed, for legend and orthodoxy, than an apostle soaking the prophet's writings with his tears? But this hypothesis is worth no more than its reverse. It's entirely possible that this is what happened, and that Ho Chi Minh, 40 years later, was quite content to commit the memory to paper. A bare fact, that's all, as one recounts an anecdote by the warmth of a fireplace. He therefore immediately sent his membership letter to the Third International. And I say that one's important because I think that is another very indicative moment. And my mouth is dry. It's indicative because of the thing that, as I've said a couple times, what pushed me away from this book initially was that it was too opaque for me in some ways, right? It was the prose was not opening itself, which is also why I came back to it, because I do love opaque prose. But the thing I sort of ended up landing on when going through this book as a whole was that, okay, good, I can just do this, and then I can do 2 more quick things, and I'm done. It wasn't that the prose was opaque, or the opacity wasn't the problem. The issue was that the thing the book is doing, I think, in both prose and politically, although I'm happy to say up front that I know very, very, very little about Ho Chi Minh, basically functionally nothing, other than that, you know, set up the regime that kicked the fucking states out of Vietnam, so critical support, I guess, or fundamental support in that way. Both politically and prosaically, I guess, or in terms of prosody, the book is very interested, again, like at the level of the sentence and at the level of history, in dancing very lightly between clarification and complication, I guess, is, yeah, complicated. Everything is being complicated as it is being clarified, and that to me is a aesthetically pleasing project, which is maybe all this comes down to. Because I cannot speak to its actual, you know, the truth of its politics or its history, and I cannot speak to anything other than what I got out of it aesthetically. Yeah, that's correct. Cool. Alright, I'll skip to the end. Not the end, but like the end. No, I'm not. I'm done. That's all I needed to do. Yeah, I don't have big thoughts about this book other than my own journey through it, which felt extremely edifying, and that's through multiple vectors, right? That is through just like the small images that stuck with me. That is through the sort of aesthetic politics. There's a bit that I didn't read that is like a real fucking good piece of literary theory that just exists on its own in a small way, about how the need to exist singularly in the world should be pushed back against by literature. Yeah, just a bunch of small, very good things about Faraway, the Southern Sky. Hey, thanks for not watching.